Our guest today is Susan Safra, who is the founder and director of Flex Learning Academy, a microschool in South Florida, and one of the many innovative education options that are sprouting in that area. I had a chance to meet Susan when I visited the Fort Lauderdale area during the fall, and I'm thrilled to have her on the show. Susan Safra, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here. You have spent over 30 years in education. You have sort of an interesting background in education, then moving into more of the microschooling world and providing, kind of alternative education solutions for families in Florida. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that evolution, kind of your early days in education, what you were doing, and then how that's evolved over the past few decades.
Okay. Well, my experience with education actually started when I was a student, and as a dyslexic child, an undiagnosed dyslexic child, I always struggled with school, and my teachers didn't quite know how to teach me. So I ended up teaching myself and learning or teaching strategies to myself, learning how to learn. And so I always remember thinking, one day when I'm the teacher, or one day when I own a school, I'm going to do it this way. And it always made sense to me. So that was really the beginning. I worked for as a beginning teacher. I worked in the public sector. I was a public school teacher for middle school and high school for about 14 years. I also taught at a local community college. And then I eventually ventured on my own. I realized that education is much more than just sitting in the classroom. I knew that there had to be a better way than what was being given, the traditional model. And so I broke out on my own, became an entrepreneur, and started a tutoring SAT prep company called Educational Pursuit. And from there, I just kept seeing more and more issues in education that needed to be addressed. So we decided to start the school in 2016, and that's where we are now.
Amazing. Oh, there's so much I
Mhm.
want to talk about there. But let's start with your observation that something had to be better, right? So you're in the conventional schooling environment and you're getting this sort of nagging feeling that there must be a better way. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what you were seeing and what you were imagining.
Right. Well, as a student myself, I always felt that education had to happen through experience. I don't believe in textbooks per se. I think that the world should be open to you, and that's how you learn. Learn by doing and then applying that knowledge. And so I remember sitting in my language arts class. I taught high school language arts, and they would have to learn vocabulary, and they would study for 5 minutes before the test, memorize the words. They don't necessarily know what the words meant, but they memorized the words and the definitions. They spit it back out on a test, and they had A's. And I thought, this is not very effective. They don't understand. So I started looking for other ways to teach vocabulary. I actually ended up writing a book called Beyond Words, which teaches breaking words down into meaningful parts and word dissecting. And that seemed to really help. So I ended up writing the book about my experience in teaching it in the classroom. But it was things like that where I noticed that, for example, we had the FCAT. Before that, it was the HSCT. It was always some kind of a test to determine whether or not students were successful or if they could pass high school. And I was never one for teaching the test. I would always teach skills, but I never taught it as this is how you take a test. It was more, I have to teach critical thinking. So I'm going to engage them in Socratic discussion in order to teach them those skills that they needed, rather than just the test. And I would see students failing other classes, and I thought there's no reason that this bright, gifted, happy child is failing these classes simply because they're taking a test and it's telling them that they're not worthy enough, that they don't know. If I engage them in a conversation, they're brilliant. And so I saw that disconnect, and I knew that something had to happen. I just wasn't quite sure what it was or how to go about opening a school. So it sat for many years percolating in my brain of what I needed to do.
I'm sure many of us can relate to that
Yeah.
experience of sitting in public schools, at least from my experience. And yes, memorizing right before the test, regurgitating that
Yeah.
information that we had to do. And then, in many cases, quickly forgetting what it was that we memorized. So we became adept at playing this game of school without really appreciating learning and this love of learning and discovery. And so that it's interesting that you saw that also as a teacher and recognized that there could be a better way. And then you went off and built that better way. So you, before launching the micro school in 2016, you said that you created a tutoring center. And that's also an interesting pathway that I've seen other education entrepreneurs take, where you'll start with a tutoring center, some kind of after school program, and then eventually that develops into a full-time micro school. So tell us a little bit about what that looked like from going from the tutoring center to the micro school.
Well, it actually developed while I was still a classroom teacher. And I saw this need for students to understand really what education was about, how to learn. So I took a lot of the strategies that I taught myself as a student, and I incorporated that into an SAT program, and it really seemed to work. And students understood it. In fact, they began using the strategies that I was teaching in the SAT class. They started using those strategies in their actual classes in school because they were all experiential. I didn't start a tutoring center per se. I actually started it out of my house. I remember my children were very young, and my husband would take them in the other room, and I would open up the living room and I would teach a class there, and I was demonstrating things and having discussions with them about these things, and it just kind of turned into something where it just grew. I ended up moving and converting my garage into a classroom, and then a year later we took out a second mortgage on the house, and we just opened up a 2,400 square foot facility. And every time um, I opened something new, or where I grew, there were new challenges that were there for me to face. And for example, students came to me for tutoring in other subjects because they really enjoyed the way that we were teaching. So I had students who were taking AP classes who needed help. And I realized these are students who really should not even be in an AP class. They should be successful where they are. I always believe in meeting students where they are, not challenge them to be up here when they're only down here. And so from there, we just started adding other areas to our program. And I knew that at one point we would open the school. I think that it became very clear that I needed to open the school when my daughter was in third grade. And she too, like myself, is dyslexic. I was undiagnosed till I was 19, but I identified, I believe when she was in about first grade, I identified she was showing signs of dyslexia. And by third grade, I was told by the school that my daughter was in danger of failing the FCAT. And if she did fail the FCAT, then they were going to make her repeat third grade because that was the protocol. Meanwhile, she was earning A's, she was reading, she was doing very well. She was one of the oldest ones in her class. And I thought, there's no way you're going to fail my child. I'd actually been asking for the school to do a child study on my daughter for about a year. And it actually took this situation for me to say, you know what, if she doesn't have the accommodations in place, if she doesn't have an IEP, if she doesn't get the services that she needs, I'm just going to open up my own school. And then I thought, yeah, she's not the only one who needs this. There are so many other kids who really need this. And that's where it started to develop into I can do so much more than just tutoring. Because what I found myself doing is I was tutoring kids so that they would fit into the box, to fit into the traditional system. I don't believe in the traditional system. I believe that the traditional system is antiquated. It was created over 150 years ago during the Industrial Revolution to create factory workers. Here's a manual. You need to memorize this manual, and you're going to sit in rows just like you will stand in rows at the factory. And we've never really gone forward with that type of learning. Yes, we have technology, but we're not using it in the form that kids need it today. And so that's when everything started to develop. So I actually, usually say that my daughter is really my first flex student because she needed to learn in a different way. And I just started noticing more and more kids coming to me with those same needs. And I had to just develop it.
What an incredible story. I can just picture this tutoring program and these tutoring services migrating from your living room to then your garage, and then eventually realizing that you had to do something more formal, more structured, as a micro school when your daughter was encountering those challenges.
Yeah.
So at that point, were you were in your garage running this tutoring program, still working in the district at that point?
I was.
Okay.
I had a full-time job working. I was a English teacher at this time at a high school. Actually, helped open the high school. I was the senior class sponsor. I was on the SAC committee. I led different teams, and at the same time, I was running educational pursuits. So it was much more than and still is much more than just a tutoring company. We were actually teaching SAT and ACT classes, running college tours, and I was also doing college advising. And I should say college and career advising, because I don't believe that college is for every student. There are so many other wonderful options for careers. And so it just started to transform itself.
So
And
you were
as,
busy. Yeah.
yeah,
And so so
and a
then
mom of two kids.
and
Yeah.
a mom of 2 kids, right. So then what was it like? I mean, at some point when you were going to launch Flex as a full-time program and resign from your teaching position, what was that like? Did it feel like, yes, this is the next step, or was it scary, or a little bit of both?
Uh, Probably a little bit of both now that I think about it. I actually had educational pursuit first. So I took a leave of absence from the county before I officially retired from Broward County Schools, and I opened up educational pursuit. We were there for about 14 years. I also did a little bit of work as a guidance director at a private school while I was also running educational pursuit. I came in to help them for a little bit. I found myself there for several years, trying to help them build their program, and then eventually left again. All the while, I was still running educational pursuit. Then, about 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now, we decided to launch Flex at our location at Educational Pursuit. So we started with 4 kids, and within 4 years, we got to 40, and
Mm,
now we have a waiting list, and we're
yeah.
actually ready to launch our second center. And it's growing, and as I said, it morphs, it becomes its own entity. It was very scary. It was, we took out a second mortgage on our home, and we put it into building this education center. But I trusted myself, and I trust that the need is there. And if it's there, and if you build it, they will come, and they have. And it's been an amazing journey. So yes, it was scary, but at the same time, I can't imagine doing anything else. This is my purpose in the world.
Mhm. Ah, just incredible, and so wonderful to see your success and your continued growth, opening the second location next year. That must feel really rewarding, and looking back upon kind of where you've come and where you're going. So tell us a little bit more about Flex. What does it
Okay.
entail? What does a day or a week look like for the students there? Is it full-time, part-time? What are the sort of mechanics of Flex?
So Flex is a full-time program. Our students come to us 5 days a week, as if they were in a normal school. 8:45 to 3 o'clock, and every day we have 4 blocks. We have 2 blocks in the morning, 2 blocks in the afternoon, and then they have recess between each block. Even the high schoolers. We want the kids to go outside and play and get fresh air and do things and interact. We actually have a cell phone box that they deposit their cell phones in the morning so they can't have them in the afternoon, and they actually communicate the old fashioned way with face to face. They play games, they do all sorts of different activities. The morning is when we traditionally have our academic blocks. So they would have language arts, math, science, and social studies in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, they have an elective that they can choose from. There's 2 electives a day, so we do offer 10 electives, and they also have something called flex time, which is where they can work on their assignments. We don't believe in homework. We also don't believe in tests. Um, I feel that when the kids leave at 3 o'clock and they go home, I want them to be kids. I want them to go outside and play. I want them to ride their bikes. I want them to do sports and activities. I want them, if when they're older, have a job, go volunteer, have all sorts of wonderful experiences, because this is the time when they can learn what they want to do and who they want to become. We have students who have jobs at the Humane Society, or who are working on music production, on their own, and they actually have their own businesses through our entrepreneurship classes. These are the things that we want them doing after school. So we give them time during the school day to work on that with their teachers present. It's almost as though they are getting private tutored through their teachers. Their teachers are assisting them all day long and helping them to manage their projects and get their assignments done in a timely manner.
And so it's students that are in 6th grade through 12th grade.
Yeah.
And what are you finding the students are like? Are they have they been in a conventional classroom and discovered that it wasn't working? Is it more that they think that there can be a better way? I mean, sort of what um prompts families to find you and to ultimately join the Flex community?
That's a good question. There are a lot of different reasons that people seek us out. And I think that the majority of families just find that they're done with traditional learning. Most of our students do come from a public school or have been in public school, or a private school or a charter school. They've done the traditional route, and it's the same thing, whether you're in public school, private school, or charter school. That's still a traditional model. Our parents are so brave and courageous because they realize that their kids need something different, that they need to explore the world. Our students are innovative, they are creative, they are motivated, they love learning. They just need to learn in a different way. We do at the beginning of the school year, we do a learning styles assessment so that they can see what style of learning fits them best, and then we can work with that. The majority of our students are kinesthetic. They learn better by doing things physically or having discussions, and kind of incorporating a little bit of everything. And we try to create an individualized learning plan for every single student based on what their needs are. So it becomes very personalized as well.
So you created your microschool before microschooling really became trendy over the past couple of years,
Yes.
and also before there has really been growth in education, entrepreneurship, and
Yeah,
microschools in South Florida specifically. So
yeah.
I wonder, what you think is happening in terms of these trends in education toward smaller, more personalized learning environments. What do you think has been going on over the past several years, both kind of pre 2020 and obviously since the education disruption from the COVID response, that has generated additional interest in this model?
Yeah, I think that, well, I can tell you that in 2015, 2016, when I first started mentioning that I was going to create a school, in fact, when I even applied to become a school through Florida Department of Education, they said, "Are you public school, private school, or charter?" And I said, "Nope, not any of those." And they said, "Well, then you can't be a school." I said, "Well, I am a school. It's called school choice, and this is a choice for many families." People did not know what the term micro school was. It was foreign. They said, "A what school? You're going to make, wait, that's really small." Yeah, that's micro. And so I really found myself educating the public on what micro schooling was, which for us, we are a hybrid homeschool, hybrid private school model. And it kind of has the benefits of everything. And I think it was in the very beginning, it was difficult for people to truly understand what it was. They loved the sound of it, but they weren't quite sure, is this right for my child? A lot of parents really felt like, yes, this is what my child needs, but they were kind of afraid to take that leap, leave what is known for the unknown. And so, we did start out smaller, and through educating the community, we've really grown, and we're very well known in this area. I believe we were, if not the very first, we were definitely one of the first, although I don't know of any other micro schools that existed in Broward County prior to that. When the pandemic happened and 2020 happened, we actually were full. And then the only time that we actually closed and we went online, we actually did our school, virtually, but this way. So we still had our Socratic discussions and projects and, exchanges with the kids online. But the only time that we were actually closed was during the quarantine. Other than that, we were open. And the kids came, and it was mask optional and whatever everyone felt comfortable with. But because of that, I think that people saw what education really was. And I think that for the first time in decades, parents saw what was really happening in the classroom, and they were not happy with it, and the children were not doing well. In my SAT business, in educational pursuit, we're seeing a tremendous deficit in skills. So students come to us, whereas they should be in algebra 2, and they maybe are, they didn't learn anything in algebra or geometry because of what was happening with the pandemic and with education. So I think a lot of parents are frustrated. In fact, if you look at homeschooling numbers prior to 2020, I think by 2019, I think there were 2.5 million students that were being homeschooled. Within 2 years, it doubled. I believe there's closer to 5 or 6 million students that are being homeschooled right now. And that's not even taking into consideration the pods and now these micro schools or these alternative programs that are popping up. And people are understanding that this is really the wave of the future. When in 2016, when I started this, my goal was to revolutionize education. And I believe we have, and they're just starting to pop up all over the place. You mentioned that conference that we went to when I met you in Fort Lauderdale, and it was this consortium of other micro schools, and we all came together. And a lot of these entrepreneurial women came up to me and said, I followed you. You gave me some great advice, and I got started. And it's wonderful because there's so many of us, and we serve so many different types of learners, and we share resources, and it's absolutely amazing. There's something out there now for everyone. And if there isn't, people are now willing to go out there and to make these schools appear for students to meet the needs of the kids. So it's been wonderful. It went from literally not knowing what a micro school was to now, oh, your kid's in micro school. Oh, that's great. Which one do you go to?
Yeah, it really is this transformational moment in education, and it's wonderful to see that you've inspired so many other micro schoolers in and founders in the South Florida area. And I think that also creates those network effects that
Yeah,
now there's this community, as you speak of, that's really helping to share information and knowledge and encourage
do this.
more educators to do what you've done, which is really exciting to see. So, as I've traveled the country and talked to micro school founders and education entrepreneurs, it seems to me that Florida tends to be one of the more friendly states for entrepreneurship and business owners, and education entrepreneurs specifically. And yet there are still many challenges. In your case, you
Yeah.
talk about them not understanding what micro schools are, kind of often local zoning regulations that
Yeah.
make it really difficult. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about some of those challenges, some of those barriers.
It's interesting that you said that we're one of the friendliest states. I wouldn't have known that because of all the challenges. I feel that I've kind of been the tip of the spear and just kind of plowing my way through the red tape and the bureaucracy and paving the way for others to come. It has been very difficult. Because we're not recognized as a school, but we still have the challenges of what a school should be. So, as far as facilities, this past year, we actually we were going to be leasing a farm, a 3-acre facility, because in the past few years we do a lot of we do barn classes, and we do a lot of different types of experiences. So we wanted to have our school on a farm. I was able to speak with all the powers that be, the zoning people, the city planners, the city attorney, and we were given the green light to go ahead and do what we wanted to do. In fact, they were the ones who were instrumental in telling us specifically what the zoning would be. And then after we signed the lease and got the land and started everything, it was revoked. And we were told, well, you can't really use that designation. And if you do, you're limited to only 10 students. They were putting us under daycare use, because what we do is non-existent in the counties. And so that was really the problem in Broward County and in all these other municipalities. We don't exist. There is nothing for what we do. There is no specific zoning for it. So are we community facility? Not really. Are we a school? Not really. Are we, a daycare? Not really. I have high schoolers. I've got some kids who are 18 who are adults, and so we really did not fit into it. And I feel that the ordinances and the zoning laws are archaic. They are pre-COVID, and they have not gotten up to speed yet. Slowly they are. So right now, over the summer, we had to tell 40 families, guess what? We're not going to be at this fabulous farm that we spent all this money on and started building a barn for our animals. And we did. Luckily, it was very, very fortunate to find another location. But it was very difficult because there are very few locations that you can be. If you are a general assembly, or if you're a community facility, you can only be in those certain areas that are zoned for that. And then they have to be at least 1,000 feet from another community facility, um, which makes it very difficult. So right now, even though we have found what I believe is our permanent home, and we're opening up a second location, um, I'm still fighting that city, and I'm still going to the meetings. And they are actually, I have this city literally working on changing the ordinance. So as we speak, it's taking a long time. They promised it would be ready in August, and then September, October. So I have a feeling in the new year, but I am working with them on changing the ordinance so that some of these programs can be brought into it. I'm also working with some state legislatures on bringing it to the state level to change, because I think that it's not enough just to change it in the municipalities or in the county. I think this needs to be a statewide and a nationwide undertaking. And if I have to change the laws, then I will do that. And it's
Wow.
exhausting, but
Yeah.
it needs to be, and somebody needs to do it. And it's not enough to just say, well, one day it's going to happen. We have to stick together, and we have to make it happen together. And that's where I am right now.
Ah, so exciting. And as you're trying to build and expand your program to also be fighting some of these regulations that prevent innovation, as you mentioned, these
Yes,
outdated definitions of schooling, and kind of putting you into these buckets of public school, private school, or charter school, but recognizing that hybrid schools and micro schools and homeschooling collaboratives really don't fit into any of those neat buckets. So really trying to push that, which is exciting to see. Uh,
right.
and and so, I wonder, as you think ahead, Susan, to where Flex Learning Academy will be over the next few years. You're opening this other location. Where do you see your program in the next 5 years?
That's a great question. My answer today will be different than it will be next year, because, as I said, we're flexible. We are constantly growing and flexing and moving and experiencing new things. As challenges arise, we meet those challenges. So my thought for last year was that we were going to be on this 3-acre ranch, whereas now we're in a different location, and we've been asked to grow in a different area. So as of right now, I can see having several different flex learning facilities. I can see them all over the country, wherever they are needed. The great thing about our model is that you can do it anywhere. It could be out of a home, it could be out of a barn, it could be in an official learning center. It could be anywhere. It could be in a performing arts studio, because it is a flexible learning style. And that's what FLEX stands for, flexible learning experience. And you can experience it anywhere. So I do see multiple locations run by multiple entrepreneurs, such as myself, and using the FLEX learning method.
And this is so exciting. I wish you well in your
Thank
future
you.
goals there, and just it makes me so thrilled to think about lots of these flex learning academies and flex learning programs across the country. But what do you think of the overall microschool movement? Do you think that this is a fad that will fade as
Mm.
educational trends in the past have, or do you think that this has staying power?
My goal would be that this becomes the new school, that this becomes the norm. This is how education is supposed to be. The old methods of traditional learning, sitting in rows, the kids think their school, they call it a jail, where they can't move, they can't think for themselves, they can't express themselves creatively. Art and music are really not important. Where the emphasis is put on things that are not as important. I think that that is starting to fade. I really do feel that micro school movement is the wave of the future. I would love to see, instead of thousands of students in a school, that we have just 100 or 200 students, where even within those, you can have little clusters. I taught actually at the largest high school in the country. We had over 5,000 students going to this high school, and I believe that those days are going to be gone. I think it's going to take us some time. My goal would be that within the next 10 years, you see the breakdown of these traditional models as school choice becomes more prominent, and more parents say, hey, I want my child at a micro school, and there's more funding that's available to these families. I think that that is the next wave of education.
Ugh, I hope you're right. I sense that that is true as well, and that this really is not something that will fade anytime soon. That in fact, it's just beginning, and that we'll see this shift towards small, more personalized learning communities with much more choice for parents. So, Susan, if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, follow your work, learn more about Flex, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can reach out to me. I'm always available online or by phone or text. They can go to my website, which is flexlearningacademy.com, or check out my Facebook page. We do have an Instagram, but I'm more, there's only so much time of the day. So our Facebook page is probably the best way. I show pictures every week of what we're doing and what we're learning, and just like our page and follow us, and they can message me that way as well.
Susan Safra, thank you again for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.